So Spider-Man Brand New Day is coming out shortly, supposedly reigning in a whole new era for this iteration of the Wallcrawler.
Rebirth.
And for that reason, I thought it'd be the perfect time to finally speak my mind on MCU Spidey thus far, addressing the character throughout the home trilogy and itinerary appearances, before we see if they can truly deliver on bringing him back to his roots as fans have dearly wanted. Looking back, it's really quite odd how this character was first introduced, wasn't it? Almost 2 hours into Civil War, the movie completely derails into a 6-minute scene where Tony Stark randomly seeks out some teenager who hasn't been set up in any way prior and has no relevance to the plot, solely so he can join in on their big grey CGI fight. You really shouldn't do this within a story, yet it feels excusable in the meta sense that any person born on this planet just inherently knows who Spider-Man is. So you took the lines he said, measured them up against your pre-existing knowledge of the character, and figured this was their way of skipping past the origin, so he could get right into the action. Of course, this was before we knew that MCU Spidey fundamentally failed to capture various aspects of him properly. You're so hot, Aunt May. Still, this introduction showed a lot of initial promise, seemingly putting a large focus on the money problems, not only swapping out the Parkers' typical household in Forest Hills, Queens for a busy apartment building, but having his broke-ass dumpster diving for technology to build stuff with, making it clear his secret identity is imperative as opposed to what you've come to expect from the rest of the heroes in this universe, and making Peter over the course of the scene gain Iron Man's respect so he'd actually call him Spider-Man, the way it was intended when Stan Lee chose to not have him or his readers be patronized with an infantilizing name. The whilst the following airport fight made him out to be relatively competent, it also very much started the fumbly, awkward fanboyism this take became quite infamous for, having to gasp in awe and constantly remark how awesome everything around him is. I don't entirely understand the potential man meme, but it very much plays out like Peter getting set up to basically be the next generation, with the focus being on this bright-eyed boy, inexperienced and yet super powerful, getting to know all the heroes he's eventually gonna succeed one day. In a way, making MCU Spider-Man at times genuinely feel more like My Hero Academia's Deku than the character he's actually supposed to be. And this unbreaking tie to his superhero mentor figure would only continue to loom over him for several movies to come, branding him as Iron Boy Jr., with every film insistently reminding you of the fact it takes place in a greater universe. I suppose it makes sense that after how long it took for them to get the chance, they wanted to fully indulge in the potential of Spidey interacting with the other superheroes of this world before the big players would soon see their conclusion and it would be too late, making Iron Man an intrinsic point of focus in his stories. Yet, while being a somewhat understandable position, as you would likely never be able to replicate this particular set of circumstances, it still ended with stories very atypical of what you come to this character for. Homecoming is a pretty good movie. It has some exciting scenes, quite a cool villain, lots of funny moments, even if the joke of the monotone delivery ironically became quite monotonous in itself, and it resolves in a satisfying way. But the whole premise of the conflict is Peter being overly obsessed with being Spider-Man and wanting to prove himself to become an Avenger, when one of the most fundamental aspects of Peter Parker's character is that he absolutely resents Spider-Man most of the time and just wishes he'd be able to live a normal life. So it's quite strange having a movie almost run actively contradictive to that idea, especially as giving Peter a friend who knows by stealing Genki and a stupid Iron Man suit AI massively lightens the burden being Spider-Man is supposed to be. He's just kinda too comfortable. Flash's bullying making him have a momentary lapse in judgment and almost use his powers to do something stupid is a genuinely fantastic Peter Parker moment, and feels very in line with the way his short temper is something he's often at battle with, especially in his younger years. But both him leaving here and when Liz invites him to go swimming rings a bit more hollow, knowing Peter is exhilarated to be able to be Spidey and doing what he does with the intent to prove himself to Mr. Stark instead of merely out of responsibility. I'm sure this isn't his primary concern, but it still frames some of his actions more selfishly than the movie probably intends. I found literally no other place to put this in the video, but allow me to quickly praise the fact that Spider-Man is one of the only characters in the MCU to receive a consistent leitmotif, which they carry forth throughout. Maybe they overused it a slight bit at parts, but because of that, it at least sticks with you and gives the character a much stronger auditory identity than most others around him in this universe. What I did not like were the constant changes in costume every single movie, and just some of the design decisions they made with them. As explored in my video on Spider-Man's real logo, literally just slap on the eyes and you can instantly tell it's supposed to be him. So it's not like you'd ever fail to recognize Spider-Man when looking at the character. But the strange double-layered web pattern, so thin and flat it basically doesn't read at a distance, the black stripes and the weird unnecessary panel lines scattered across always bothered me. And while I love me my comic booky skin-tight costumes with all the muscles showing through, clearly trying to achieve this effect by painting all over the suit with CGI doesn't work in live action. I'm glad they seem to be going a different direction from here on out. The impossible to follow fight on the epilepsy plane aside, I think the final act is pretty great. Having Peter, after losing his pimped up high-tech suit and his chance at being an Avenger, return to make up for neglecting his civilian life, and then unexpectedly be brought face to face with the Vulture. The way Liz keeps finding exactly the wrong things to say to get Peter in deeper and deeper trouble is just the right kind of frustrating that it builds tension for Tomb's threat quite well. Before we have Spidey doing the right thing at the highest personal sacrifice under the utmost risk with no ulterior motives. I especially liked how Peter left his phone in the car to track Vulture, showing that there wasn't even really a moment he considered not doing the right thing. Plus him racing down the dark corridor throwing away his tie for the dance is a strong visual. And of course him turning down Tony, deciding to be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man would have been a really nice conclusion. If they stuck to it. The way he immediately got the Stark suit back, before Infinity War would have Spidey get the Iron Spider anyway, definitely devalued it. Liz moving away after Peter got her dad in prison also in a way very swiftly avoids the consequences of him messing up her life, since she's entirely removed from the picture and Peter is free to forget about her and move on to his favorite quirked up white girl who he was obviously deeply in love with all along, Michelle Jones. I feel like there was another minor lack of consequences that I'm forgetting at the moment, but I don't seem to remember. You're so hot, Aunt May. I'm of course not saying Spider-Man just missing from the climax of the MCU would have been better than what they ended up doing, by the way. It makes sense that he's there, and there's enjoyable material with him in it. We get a lot of additional interactions between him and other characters, proceeding to set up his role as the next generation, and of course, you can't really raise the stakes any higher than by showing your flagship character, after almost obsessively reinforcing his youth, whimpering and crying as he fades to dust. The words, "I don't feel so good," have stuck with viewers for a long time, I imagine. Endgame being able to further tug on people's heartstrings with Tony mourning and feeling responsible for Peter's death, their very sweet hug in the final battle, and Peter crying over his corpse. It's all good stuff to cash out on their relationship in Civil War and Homecoming. It's just very unfortunate that it immediately undoes whatever status quo the ending of the previous movie attempted to establish in such a roundabout way that we are right back in Iron Boy Jr. territory before ever getting much of the proper character we wanted out of him. If you were around for the discourse about MCU Spidey as the movies were coming out, you repeatedly heard the same thing. First it was Homecoming. This movie is him stepping out of Iron Man's shadow and actually becoming the real Spider-Man. Then it was Far From Home. No wait, actually it's this movie where he steps out of Iron Man's shadow and becomes the real Spider-Man. Before we got No Way Home. Wait a second. This was actually all just his origin story, and now he's really actually the real Spider-Man for real. It got incredibly frustrating having the promise of the character you want to see be continuously dangled in front of your nose like a carrot on a stick, and this idea of, oh, he has to earn to be Spider-Man has very annoyingly infected a lot of other stories too now. Talking about walking things back, Far From Home took a confirmed Thanos snap survivor that would have been really interesting and retconned it because wouldn't want to have it actually affect the characters in any kind of meaningful way. You're so hot, Aunt May. Far From Home, for a film that supposedly examines Peter dealing with Tony's death, by the way, weirdly loves making light of the events of Infinity War and Endgame. Coming up with the infantilizing name of The Blip to show the innumerable count of people who died comedically snapping back into place as they were, playing a shitty montage of the fallen heroes, and again, making it so not one person out of the cast of characters that matter survived, meaning it may as well not even have happened. Now, I will say that I generally despise such kind of cosmic events disrupting the preferably relatable and grounded storytelling of Spider-Man media. It completely messes with the narrative to have some dumb, impersonal bullshit interfere with the characters' lives in a way where the story is forced to bend a knee to it. But if there's one thing that would have warranted it, it's probably the combination of a decade's worth of movies and the supposed finale of the MCU. Oh well. Far From Home's conflict resides within Peter just wanting to have his time off finally, not to be plagued by being Spider-Man for a while so he can confess his spontaneous love for MJ, but being continuously dragged back into Spidey business to defeat the Elementals, before eventually fighting Mysterio, who was behind it all. I know people have a lot of issues with this film. From Peter rather wanting to hang out with MJ than doing what's right, this fuck-ass bus scene, to letting himself be fooled by Mysterio to hand him the most dangerous weapon on the planet, and surely several more common criticisms that I'm forgetting right now. But honestly, I don't mind the whole idea of Peter wanting to give Spider-Man a break. It's very much in his character to leave Spidey behind for a time, or at least try to after suffering a lot of pain. Or dearly wanting to get with a girl, but Spider-Man keeps getting in the way and messing things up. The part where the issue lies for me is that I was being quite literal when I said he is dragged back into Spidey business, as opposed to how Peter often is determined to just leave things be and have someone else handle it. Whatever, I don't care. Aside from very niche cases like the death of Jean DeWolf, his sense of responsibility always gets the better of him, and he ends up saving whoever is in need, no matter whether he wants to or not. It's just who he is. This all, however, becomes significantly less compelling, less tragic, and less of a proof of character when it's not Peter alone tearing himself away from his friends or family, but instead of fake Nick Fury talking in his ear, as S.H.I.E.L.D. instructs him when and where to be in position to help people. The implication being that he potentially wouldn't have actually ended up doing so if left to his own accord, which doesn't sit right with me at all. And even other people in his cycle seemingly want him to save lives more than he himself does. I'll fucking talk about all this later, just you wait. You're so hot, Aunt May. The whole thing with Edith, I don't know, man. It's an element I just wish didn't exist in the first place, which funnily enough seems to be Peter's exact feelings on the matter. He's definitely developed more of a backbone in this film and doesn't want to deal with either the S.H.I.E.L.D. crap nor the glasses handed to him. The fact he gives them up to Mysterio also feels in line with the character to a certain extent. We know from the Cosmic Spider-Man storyline that there is such a thing as too much responsibility for him to take on, and so Beck preying on Peter's insecurities to make himself out as the better choice to safely take on that power, I think is a clever way to play with the idea of Mysterio pretending to be a hero in his first appearance. And it is a mistake in-universe, which is acknowledged as such by the character after the fact, which tends to always somewhat lighten the blow for me. Nothing is worse than a character making an obviously wrong decision and the movie framing it as if he were in the right. How nonchalantly Peter sits maskless in a bar with what he believes to be dozens of people being able to see his face is fucking stupid though. And literally, how could you not question how the ultimate global surveillance glasses, which are able to identify his classmates in an instant even just by the back of their heads, wouldn't make some kind of fuss about Peter directly looking into the face of someone who was fired by Tony Stark for being unstable and potentially dangerous. It should have completely blown Quentin's plan on the spot. Once again, we get a villain whose motivation is Tony Stark, with our beloved working-class hero valiantly fighting in the honor of his rich sugar daddy, which I can't help but find incredibly bothersome even all these years later. Yet the lack of a personal connection to the villains, I don't actually mind. I feel like the Osborns are so special to Spidey's mythos specifically because they tie into Peter Parker's life in a very unique way, which the majority of his rogues gallery just doesn't. Slapping something of the sort onto every single foe he encounters kinda devalues it. Though it does of course make for more compelling drama in the movies, which is why they keep doing it. I really quite enjoyed Mysterio in this movie, not only rocking a genuinely fantastic design when they don't have him in the lame mocap fit, but being great fun to watch with just how unapologetically evil and unhinged he was, blaming society while clearly taking pleasure in taunting and tormenting Peter, showing no qualms about killing him or his fellow classmates, who are all still children by the way. And hey, they did the spectacular Spider-Man scene where he fights with his eyes closed. Isn't that sick? Sure would have been convenient, of course, if the Spider-Sense had existed prior to this, as Homecoming entirely forgot about it to do two different identity reveals which shouldn't have happened. Speaking of identity reveals, I've been saying this for years, but I genuinely think the ending of Far From Home took one step too far. Imagine what a nice way JJJ's return and Mysterio's lie could have been to bring Spider-Man into a very comic book typical status quo as public enemy number 1, especially around the time he killed George Stacy. I really gotta finally make a video about that sometime. It could have gotten us into a comfortable spot where MCU Spidey can return to the kind of troubles you want to see this character face and overcome. But by having Peter's identity be outed to the whole world, there's no reason he shouldn't just reinen Tisch machen, be fully and entirely honest about everything, since there's nothing he has left to lose. Whilst also dropping all pretense, he couldn't just console his Avengers buddies to get everything worked out for him. Pepper Potts seemed to like him. That's gotta mean something in this world. And No Way Home seemed to in fact realize that it overstepped a boundary, because despite what a crazy cliffhanger Far From Home seemingly left out on, within less than 10 minutes, Matt tells Peter that it doesn't really matter, and within 20 minutes, it loses all relevance to the film entirely. Yet again, these movies seem actively allergic to consequences.
Welcome back, everyone.
Hey, welcome back, Peter.
I believe there was one interesting little line here calling this out, but I couldn't quite focus. You're so hot, Aunt May. I don't think you need me to explain how both Peter and especially Doctor Strange are genuinely fucking moronic in this scene, and how incredibly frustrating that is as a catalyst to your movie. But after their spell is cast, the actual plot can begin. Of course, as we all know, No Way Home's claim to fame is lazy nostalgia bait. Oh, sorry, I forgot that because it's with characters people actually care about, it somehow undoes its status as such and becomes fan service done right. This is the way it's meant to be done. Those other movies just don't get it. And like, sure, the implementation is definitely more fleshed out as the plot revolves around these characters instead of them just being slapped in there as superficial blink and you'll miss it cameos, but that doesn't absolve it from still just feeling like mashing action figures together. Especially with what a genuinely embarrassing role Sandman and the Lizard play, and how by the criteria the movie itself presents, Electro shouldn't even be here.
Everyone who knows Peter Parker's Spider-Man.
I just thought you was gonna be black.
The rules they establish also puts into question what curing the villains even accomplished, as they seem to be taken out of their dimension right before they died, and at the end, assumedly returned to the same place.
Peter, wait! Peter, I'm cured! Peter, it's me, Norman! Peter!
And it just feels so lazy and disrespectful to have Spider-Man 2's ending, where Peter defeats Ock by appealing to his humanity, repeating his own words and beautifully bringing together the themes of the film, until Otto finds the strength to fight the arms and retrieve control over himself, instead be handled by Tom slotting a fucking high-tech Iron Man chip into his brain. What a great new ending to this movie, where, mind you, Octavius is still gonna die 3 seconds after anyway.
I won't!
Oh, Rosie, I love this boy.
With how much this movie hinges on your nostalgia for the older ones, it's quite weird how much of this plot is undermined by you simply remembering what actually happened in them. Despite the various issues with this whole setup though, I think the idea of having Peter try save the villains from their inevitable doom and curing them is good stuff. It's certainly better than him planning to just run off to Europe and fucking leave Harry to die in TASM 2. Maybe him defeating someone as powerful as Doctor Strange in order to do so is a little ridiculous, but I'm a Spider-Man fan. I'm down to watch him defeat the Fantastic Four, X-Men, and Avengers all at the same time for all I care. And him yapping about math as he does it isn't too far off from his typical applied sciences crap. After things go south in the apartment, we get an admittedly really cool fight scene between Peter and the Goblin. Willem Dafoe is once again absolutely chewing up the scenery, and while aesthetically, this doesn't hold a candle to the final battle in Raimi's Spider-Man 1, the choreography and Norman's utterly manic expression throughout is honestly such a treat. Ending in terrible tragedy, as you're so dead, Aunt May. Alright, let's take it back a minute. If there was one aspect of MCU Spidey that just didn't work for me in the slightest, it was this fucking character. I'm genuinely baffled by what they did with Aunt May practically every step of the way. The extent of her appearance in Civil War was basically, wow, didn't you expect Aunt May to be old? But look, she's actually young and hot. Please laugh. And while Homecoming got like one decent moment, the way they immediately seek to undercut it feels spineless, while the rest of her appearance mostly continues to turn her into nothing but a sex joke. Thing is, I could see myself living this down in isolation. Sure, it's not interesting, but it's not like comic book Aunt May wasn't used a lot for comedy back in the day, like with her being oblivious to being kidnapped by the Sinister Six, for example. There's obviously other stuff that went into it which is missing, like her prehistoric age and constant health issues, putting Peter into a variety of complicated situations and forcing him to grow up fast so he could provide for her. With her youth in the MCU version once again making Peter's life much easier than it probably should be. But I could have likely looked past all of this and continued to go, you're so hot, Aunt May, like the movie wanted me to, if it wasn't for this absolute disgrace of an ending.
What the f?
Genuinely, how do you come up with something like this? How do you take one of the most important things you could possibly do in a Spider-Man story and turn it into a joke to end off your movie on? Instead of telling a heartfelt and tragic tale like The Long Conversation, where Aunt May confronts Peter after learning he is Spider-Man, remorseful over the years they've lost to a lie, opening up about their feelings of guilt over Uncle Ben's death, and grappling with how she knows there's no stopping Peter from continuing to do what he does, even if she dearly wishes she could, they simply avoid doing anything interesting or potentially resonant in its entirety to try get a laugh out of the audience. Well, I can assure you, it didn't land. This should have meant something. And then, thanks to the perfect timing of Infinity War's release, the consequences of it can conveniently be skipped over altogether. I was already tilted back then over the absolute waste of the identity reveal and what a powerful moment we lost. But when Peter died at the end, I saw hope. Because the Russo brothers publicly confirmed that Aunt May had survived the decimation. So while, I know, the Thanos snap was random and Peter would have been erased no matter what, and as stated previously, I hate universe-interfering cosmic bullshit in my human stories, at least her living on all alone for 5 years, thinking she let her fucking son die by allowing him to just keep being Spider-Man without a care in the world, could have sparked some kind of interesting conflict to happen with this character. But no, couldn't even have that. Let's retcon her surviving so we can move on like nothing happened. Gotta keep the sex joke going. And indeed, Aunt May's very first line in Far From Home is a joke about how a woman thought she fucked her husband.
The wife thought that I was a mistress.
Before it's all in on Happy just really wanting to pipe her.
Sex, there's nothing to do with sex.
If you were hoping for complications or nuance to her relationship with Peter's secret, you'll be hit in the head by how she not only accepts him being Spidey, but practically tries to force her clearly traumatized adopted son to put himself into dangerous situations. Which is an insane decision to make, only to then dedicate none of the movie's runtime towards them somehow sorting this out or her trying to understand where he is at emotionally. You could make this work. This scene in ASM 343 has Peter, after another attempt to stop being Spider-Man and realizing he has to keep going, ask Aunt May about how she'd feel if he got himself killed trying to help someone, with her harshly stating that he'd basically be dead to her if he didn't, that it would mean a complete betrayal of his very self. Which is like, geez Aunt May, way to ruin the cookout. But at the same time, I find this idea quite compelling. Over the years, the writers have really taken this character through all her losses and comically unrivaled persistence and turned her into a beacon of strength. If Uncle Ben is where Peter got his heart from, then Aunt May is the source of his absolutely indomitable spirit. Fuck you, Spider-Verse. So May putting pressure on him to stay true to himself and Uncle Ben's principles, no matter the cost, could be a very gripping approach. But not if you then play 100% of her screen presence entirely for comedy. I won't really make a big fuss about her laughing off that Uncle Ben's back blew up, but I do question why this movie even added that detail in the first place. It feels like an admittance that they should acknowledge Ben Parker existed, only for them to continue to do nothing with it. As, like previously stated, Peter keeps having to get dragged around to do the right thing, instead of there being some part in the movie where he remembers what inherently drives him to be a hero. And then, come No Way Home, after Aunt May was treated as nothing but comedic relief for 5.5 years, the movie seeming practically allergic to doing anything interesting with her, they speedrun trying to make her more headstrong and principled, before Tobey's Goblin ends up killing her. Oh, what a shame. Yeah, I won't lie, this scene just straight up didn't work for me. I'm an easily manipulable guy. Literally just play some sad music and I'm bound to get emotional or maybe even shed a tear, no matter what is happening in your film. And yet, while sitting there in the theater, despite watching Tom Holland act his heart out, I realized that I literally could not bring myself to care, no matter how much I wanted to. It was just way too late for them to only now start trying to make me take this character seriously. Her foundation was already too rotten, and it was impossible to redeem this interpretation within the little time they dedicated to it. Which is a big ass problem, since this death seems to be the trump card they hinge on to base the evolution of this Spider-Man around. I also can't help but feel incredibly cynical about this sudden choice due to her tombstone quoting Insomniac's Aunt May. It's as if they took note of how effective and highly praised her death in PlayStation Man was and thought they could win detractors of MCU Spidey over by just doing the same. See, we know emotions. But maybe that's irrelevant. If the moment had worked for me, I likely wouldn't mind sensing the inspiration. This being MCU Peter's Uncle Ben moment, to me however also feels incredibly jarring and confused. She says the words, entirely comic accurate, which is nice, but when applying it to the story the movie told, then what really is the lesson here? Spider-Man's backstory is simple and iconic. An angsty, downtrodden teenager, mad at the world for how it wronged him, gets great power thrust upon him by random chance, and then quickly begins to abuse it for his own personal gain. His inaction and unwillingness to look out for anyone but himself costing the life of one of the only two people that matter to him in this world. He was being irresponsible, and knowing what can come of that will haunt him for the rest of his life, pushing him forward to always do what's right. Yet in No Way Home, Aunt May and Peter were already doing the right thing, trying to cure and save the villains, with it blowing up in their face and ending in May getting killed. Attaching with great power there must also come great responsibility to that makes no sense. Peter wasn't punished for being irresponsible. Life-changing moral wasn't learned to become a cornerstone of his being. She basically just goes, ah shit, well oops, just keep doing what you were already doing and better luck next time. Part of me wonders if this is where the uwufication of Spider-Man becomes a problem. While I wholeheartedly believe that Spider-Man 2 is a masterpiece, I don't think any adaptation we've received so far truly was a perfect representation of the character. They often sand off Peter's edges, or just make some incredibly strange choices, leading to him not being quite as compelling as he potentially could be. But if you have rounded him off so much that you can't even make him be in the wrong and act in reckless self-interest for the great responsibility lesson to function properly, then you seriously may have went too far. Though it's probably due to the fact that they had to retroactively graft a new origin story onto him after realizing that the character didn't work. Don't let anyone try to tell you that they were playing the long game and this was always intended to be how Peter becomes Spider-Man. You can feel the panicked course correction. Civil War literally even had him imply his backstory and motivation as clearly as you possibly could have without outright saying it. And yet it's like they forgot to make the character hold true to that mantra, so they had to do it over. Anyway, sorry for getting hung up ranting about this for so long, but this had been brewing for years. In exchange, I will spare you the rant I would have done right here about how I miss when JJJ was actually allowed to be a character instead of just a glorified cameo. The scene is a great visual though. What's not at all a great visual is how Tobey and Andrew are introduced. The monumental return of the two past live-action Spider-Men happening very boringly in the kitchen of Ned's grandma's house. The first shot of Andrew being pure janky CGI and leading into an incredibly awkward scene where you can feel the built-in pauses where nothing is happening for the audience to cheer and clap. There are nice moments with the Spider-Man trying to lead Tom's Peter back on the right path after he now regrets his attempt at heroics and is ready to just send the villains to die for revenge. I won't pretend like their talk on the roof didn't have me thoroughly invested and get me in the feels at parts. Along with it being very enjoyable to see the Spider-Men bantering, bonding, and working together from a scientific Peter Parker base, instead of letting the Iron Man machine continue to do everything for them, such as with Otto's cure. What always bothers me though, and no one seems to ever acknowledge, is how Andrew's character doesn't at all compute with what he's saying. They do this whole thing about how, "Oh, I'm the bad Spider-Man. I became rageful and bitter. I don't even sleep or live as Peter Parker anymore. I'm just Spider-Man full time." He even says he stopped pulling his punches, which in Spider-Man terms literally means killing people. And yet, consistently, he's the most cheerfully positive and adorably lovable person in that whole film. How am I supposed to be shocked and moved by, I just don't want you to end up like me, when the character we are presented with displays no negative traits whatsoever? Only thing that really sticks the landing through a rewatch is him saving MJ, which is equally sweet as it is sad. Would have been nice if it looked better, of course. That CGI does not stick the landing. In general, this movie is just fucking ugly. I understand that COVID caused for a lot of issues and limitations during filming, but No Way Home is still full of horrendous looking shots, obvious green screen visible on the characters, embarrassing CGI, the whole final fight has a nigh unreadable and very uninteresting choreography, completely failing to capitalize on what three Spider-Men working together could pull off, and what in the world did they do to Tobey's mask? The movie is definitely at its most fun, best directed, and most physically tactile whenever Tom fights the Goblin, who once again gets the last laugh as he fucks everything up by blowing Doctor Strange's box to pieces and making the spell go out of control, resulting in Peter having to ask Strange to cast a new spell that makes everyone forget his existence altogether, which shall lead us into the whole new era of Brand New Day. What bothers me about this sequence of events is how, is there even any real emotional meaning or theme behind this decision? You'd think that this life-changing choice should present some kind of character arc about how he's developed over the course of the movie. At the very most, you could claim how Peter at the start of the film wasn't ready for personal sacrifice, wanting to have everything go exactly his way, whereas at the end, he is forced to sacrifice everything. But again, this whole scenario isn't explored in any kind of relatable or subtle way, but literally just came to be in the form of Doctor Strange being a fucking moron and starting a world-ending spell without discussing the conditions first. Same as with Aunt May's death, you can practically taste the desperate course correction in the writer's room, realizing that they completely failed at creating the Spider-Man people have been wanting to see, and structurally messed up the character beyond logical repair, to the point their only recourse was to create some bullshit excuse for a whole in-universe character reset to start over and try again. Which to me raises the question, is this fix they are attempting to do even possible? Can this take on Spider-Man truly be saved or redeemed? It filled me with sadistic joy seeing Tom open up the door to his new shitty apartment, sewing a proper tech-free costume all of his own before he started doing ugly, janky CGI parkour across the rooftops, seeming hopeful in melancholic solitude. But look back at how much baggage we had to go through to get to this point. What an incoherent mess this character's supposed true origin story has now become. He wasn't just bitten by a spider and then as punishment for his own mistake, learned a painful lesson to use his powers for good. He was bitten by a spider, used his powers for good immediately, got randomly picked up as the personal apprentice nepo baby of the main character of Earth, relentlessly tried to suck up to him until he decided he should be his own person for 3 seconds, before going right back to putting himself in his mentor's shadow, his lack of confidence over being able to live up to him after he died, allowing a random employee of his mentor to take advantage of him and ruin his life. But actually not really, it was mostly fine. He and his friends just suffered a minor inconvenience. Even still, he contacted his dumbass wizard friend for help, who then actually ruined his life, accidentally bringing over villains from better movies to come and kill his funny sex aunt, so 2 other versions of himself from different dimensions can help him get over his trauma and try to instill their values in him, heroically curing the people who wronged him before sending everyone back to likely still die anyway, and then doing a super spell that erases him from everyone's memory as if he never existed, so he can now be a sad, poor red and blue guy who's heard the phrase "with great power comes great responsibility" before. How could you ever try to return this character to his roots at a grounded and relatable level, going through human interpersonal struggles and trying to figure out life like the rest of us, in between saving the world, when his mere existence has already so thoroughly jumped the shark? I will try to be fair towards whatever the future holds in store, and if the movie turns out fantastic, in spite of all these asterisks and the damning reality of 10 years wasted to actually give us a proper good Spider-Man story, I'll be ecstatic. But I won't lie and pretend like part of me doesn't wish for this take to just crash and burn, so someone who gets it can start anew and bring forth a fresh and untainted adaptation of Spider-Man that doesn't try to reinvent the wheel or insert any stupid gimmicks to distinguish itself, but actually just focuses on what made him one of the most beloved and enduring characters in all of fiction. This is never gonna happen though, and I imagine they'll probably keep going with MCU Spider-Man for a movie or 2 before they kill him off to be replaced with Miles Morales. Great, my favorite. So here's hoping they at least give us some solid material until that happens, and I'll cheer because his ending was so peak I'm overjoyed, not because I'm glad he's finally dead. Lastly, I will already voice one tangible criticism I've been having with what we've seen of Brand New Day so far. As dumb and convoluted as this multiverse murder magic memory wipe scenario was, the ending of No Way Home made an unspoken promise to the audience. Peter tried to instantly undo the consequences of the spell, but when he saw MJ's wound, he realized he should stay out of their lives to protect them. It's like the movie was telling us, he does not get to return to comfort. We are closing this chapter for good, and from now on he's gonna be on his own, behaving like and tackling the struggles this character should be. Yet, the Brand New Day trailer is showing MJ and Ned being prominently featured feels like it's already somewhat walking back on this decision, betraying the promise the end of No Way Home made. In which case, what the hell even was the point of all this? Hopefully they at least have the sense to not let anyone find out his identity for once and immediately revert to the way things were before. If they go as far as doing that, then I don't know how anyone could agree with the trajectory of this Spider-Man's overarching storyline, having them literally just bring the character back to where he was by the end of Far From Home. I actually like Peter's supporting cast a lot in the comics and think that more focus should be put on them. Something as simple as a visit from Glory Grant or Peter and Flash reflecting on their friendship is incredibly important to Spider-Man in my opinion. So it's weird that I yearn for them to just be gone and stay gone in the MCU. But I think that also goes to show that they never really did anything much interesting with them throughout this trilogy. Or they'd weirdly drop the occasional hint towards one of the children's living situation, and then have it go absolutely nowhere, rendering it pointless. But yeah, to conclude this video, the MCU Spider-Man, I believe, absolutely has great moments in which he is the kind of hero you'd want him to be, or displays the appropriate kind of flaws for Peter Parker to have. But these are often only mere moments that fail to stand out of stories which largely concern themselves with character atypical conflicts or such foreign storylines that it feels like entirely the wrong thing to revolve your Spider-Man film around, missing the forest for the trees and failing to deliver on conveying the appeal of the character, with often even those great and praiseworthy moments becoming partially undermined through the dubiousness of Peter's character motivation. And all of it having the worst possible version of Aunt May ever conceived clinging onto it like the stench of the Hudson River.
And take a shower, you smell like garbage.
In this way, the MCU Spider-Man has not only birthed some to me incredibly dissatisfactory movies, but also sits on top of an extremely shaky foundation, which is gonna be hard to start telling great stories from. Here's hoping that the writers of Brand New Day, like Spider-Man himself, possess the ability to bring this tale to a state of perfect equilibrium, and create a movie that can stand strong, in spite of what came before. Well, that sure took a while. I've been meaning to make like 3 videos this month, analyzing the Traversal and the TASM video games, talking about the platforming in Devil May Cry 1, and this MCU Spidey opinion piece. But be it burnout, stress, or just a general lack of motivation, I unfortunately couldn't bring myself to work on stuff. So I had to be sure I at least get this done, as I really wanted to give MCU Spidey one final shit talking before he potentially wins me over. No hate to Tom, by the way, seems like a cool guy, just didn't agree with many choices made for his character. Big thanks to X Sunny Sunset for his little Green Goblin appearance.
I'm gonna give it a Green Gooner. I'm cute, Peter. It's me, Peter. It's Norman, Peter.
Up next, I'll probably still try rush out that little DMC1 video. Read the DMD Spectacular Spider-Man run because holy shit. Other than that, I don't really have much else to say besides the typical YouTuber things, like, comment, subscribe, hype the video, and give me money on Patreon. Also, I might open channel memberships literally just so I can make the Aria sweep an emote because I think it's funny. Now farewell, let's see how that movie turns out.